All right, today we're going to be working on editing sentences, TEKS 9DI and 9DV. We're just going to see what these STAAR questions involve. So just a quick rundown of the standard. So 9D focuses on editing drafts using standard English conventions. 9DI, using a variety of complete controlled sentences and avoidance of unintentional splices, run-ons, and fragments. In this lesson, we are going to focus specifically on those splices, run-ons, and fragments and how to avoid them. 9DV, punctuation, including commas, semicolons, colons, dashes, and parentheses to set off phrases and clauses. And so we're going to understand how to use those different types of punctuation and how they correlate with the phrases and clauses that we find in sentences. These are all significant components of the questions you see on STAAR, and we're going to really work on addressing these elements. So sentence construction. So in order for us to be able to answer these questions, we need to understand how you can construct a sentence and the rules that entails. So first, let's take a look. What makes a complete sentence? A sentence must have a subject, so who or what is the sentence about? A verb, what the subject is doing or being. A complete thought, and it can stand alone and make sense. If you have these components, it is a complete sentence. So subject plus verb equals a complete sentence. She bakes. We have my subject is she, my verb is bakes. She bakes. That is a complete thought. That is a complete sentence. John ate. John is my subject. What did he do? He ate. That is a complete thought. Now there are some exceptions to really look at, especially as you're reading, and you're going to see something like the example below, run. So run, exclamation point. It has an implied subject. So if someone was yelling run at you, the implied subject is going to be you, or you see them yelling run at a particular audience. That's when context becomes extremely important when you're reading, because you want to know who they're talking to and then what kind of took place before that particular sentence. All right, we're going to take it a step further looking at direct or indirect objects. And so we can elaborate on our sentence from not just having a subject and verb, but we can include these two other components, and pretty basic components that you use in your everyday language. So the order of the sentence, and it's important to understand these formulas because then you'll know later on when you're looking at your answer choices and the questions that are presented to you, if anything's out of order, because then it's incorrect. So your order for this sentence is always going to be subject, verb, direct object. So just keep that in mind. Now, when we introduce indirect objects, the order is always going to be subject, verb, indirect object, direct object. And so understanding this formula is not only going to help you create sentences, but also recognize when those sentences are incorrect if you are analyzing or editing a paper. And so just a heads up, so if you look on that bottom right hand corner, a direct object, all that does is answer what or whom, and it comes after the verb. Indirect object answers the questions to whom or for whom. And that'll make more sense when we look at some of our examples, but just understanding what those questions or what they answer is a little bit helpful. So a direct object, like I said, a noun or pronoun that receives the action of the verb. And so she bakes cookies. And so remember, noun or pronoun that receives the action. So the action is that verb, right? Bakes. So what is she baking? Cookies. And look what we said, it answers what, right? And it comes after the verb. And so it's an easy way to identify direct objects, and it's helpful if you're not familiar with identifying direct objects in your sentences. So what does she bake? She bakes cookies. Cookies is my direct object because it is directly being affected by that verb. So we'll take a look. Now let's look at indirect object. That can be a little tricky, so it might take some practice, but it's a noun or pronoun that receives the direct object. And so we're going to see an example here. I gave them a ride home. And so I gave them a ride home. So I gave, what did I give? I gave a ride home, so that's my direct object, right? Give is my verb. It is directly, what am I giving? What am I giving? A ride home. Now I'm going to ask, to whom do I give that ride home? I gave it to them. So, ride home is a direct object. I can use that to correlate to gave, my verb. And then to whom did I give that ride home? I gave it to them. And so it's just that sentence. It's in that same order. I gave them a ride home. And if you want, you can also play around. If you're unsure about that indirect object, I can actually take out the indirect object and still have a complete sentence. I gave a ride home. Now, if I just had I gave them, that's an incomplete sentence because it's not, or it's lacking specificity, right? What did I give them? It begs the question. So be careful about leaving some of those components out because you're going to have instances where clarity is not going to be helpful. So, direct object, indirect object, important to know the order, important to know the purpose. So clauses and phrases. Now, clauses and phrases are important to know because they can look like sentences sometimes. So all a clause is a group of words with a subject and verb. Now, these can be complete sentences or part of a sentence whole. And so we're going to keep that in mind. An independent clause, it has a subject and a verb. So it expresses a complete thought, and it can stand alone as a sentence. So independent clause, think to yourself, independent clause equals a sentence. Now an example, she ran to the store. It has a subject, it has a verb, it completes the thought, right? It can stand alone. Now we can get into more of our grammar here. To the store is the prepositional phrase. We won't get there just yet, but she ran. Complete sentence, independent clause. Dependent clause, it does have a subject and verb, however, it does not express the complete thought. And this is where a lot of students trip up when they're looking at their multiple choice, because it can look like a sentence. It cannot stand alone. And here's an example. Because she was late. So she's a subject, late, or was late, was late is a verb phrase. It looks like a sentence, but that because right there changes the entire thing. It is not a complete thought. Because she was late, and there's something missing after that fact. So just keep that in mind. It's important to understand these different clauses and types, because majority of the questions you're going to see, they're going to play around with independent and dependent clauses to try and trip you up. So clauses and phrases, let's talk about phrases. So a phrase is a group of words without both a subject and verb. So it's not a complete sentence, it doesn't express a complete thought, it cannot stand alone. Sometimes phrases can look like clauses, so just be careful. You need to know what it entails. So look for those subjects, look for those verbs. So a noun phrase, the tired old dog. There's no verb there, it's just a noun, it's just a description, right? It's not really telling me much else. So it's just a phrase. Verb phrase, was running quickly. It has a verb, but there's no subject there. So who was running quickly? I can put those two together. The tired old dog was running quickly. I have my noun, I have my verb, but separate as two individual sentences, they cannot stand alone. So just be careful when you're looking at those, because you can really perceive them as sentences sometimes. A prepositional phrase, under the bed, adds detail but has no subject or verb. So as you start to develop more complex sentences, you're going to notice these different types of phrases. Understanding how they are established and then how they work together is going to be really key to doing really well on this portion of the STAAR test. So even though these are not complete sentences, they can still be used to create sentences when you put them together with other sentence components. As you get really good at writing, you're going to use these expertly, and not only are you able to construct sentences, but you can also take a look and make sure that you're editing appropriately, whether it's your writing or a writing of your peer. All right, let's talk about combining sentences. We know our rules, we know the components of a sentence. Now we're going to understand how we put it together. So think about building a house, right? We've already established the bricks. Now we're going to look at all the mortar. We're going to look at the way that you're going to stick those bricks together to make a strong sentence, a strong foundation. All right, we're going to take a look at how we combine sentences. The first example of combining sentences is using a compound sentence. A compound sentence is just made by joining two independent clauses, complete thoughts. Remember, independent clause equals complete sentence. So when you have two complete sentences that you want to combine, this is the way you're going to do it. You can use either a coordinating conjunction or a semicolon. Now, if you're going to use a coordinating conjunction, that's your fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. That's the best way to remember it, the word fanboys. You're going to use a comma coordinating conjunction. So comma, for, comma, and, comma, nor. Any of those combinations you're going to use as appropriately in order to combine the two sentences depending on what those two sentences are saying. Or you can use a semicolon if the ideas are closely related. So you can have two complete sentences on either side of that semicolon if they correlate with one another. You're not going to use it always as a replacement for a period. Those two independent clauses need to kind of correlate. So just a quick look, let's look at the comma coordinating conjunction. So either side, independent clause, always check. If you see a comma and any type of fanboy, and it's one of your questions for your STAAR test, you need to look on either side of it. Do I see a subject? Do I see a verb? Is it a complete thought? On the other side of that, do I see a subject? Do I see a verb? Is it a complete thought? And if so, then that is the correct punctuation for it. Sometimes you're going to have to double check and make sure they're using the correct fanboy, but grammatically it's going to be correct. So she loves to read on this left-hand side right here. She visits the library every weekend. So are these two complete thoughts? Absolutely. She loves to read. We have a subject, we have a verb, and we have clarity. So it's a complete thought. So I can actually put a period right here and that'd be fine. Same thing with this other independent clause over here. She visits the library every weekend. That is a complete thought. We have a subject and a verb. I could put a period at the end. It would be a sentence to stand alone perfectly. Now, a lot of the questions on STAAR, you're going to say, hey, you have two of these sentences. Can you combine them? Go ahead and use comma and. She loves to read and she visits the library every weekend. Two complete thoughts, two independent clauses on either side, grammatically correct, and is an appropriate word to use to combine these two terms. Let's look at this other one, and this is where, once again, looking at that fanboy and making sure the appropriate word is used is going to be significant. So he was tired. He was is actually a complete sentence. What was he? Tired. So I have clarity. It's a direct object. So he was tired. He finished his homework. That's a complete sentence. He finished. We have our subject is he. Our verb is finished. What did he finish? He finished his homework. Complete sentence. So I do have two complete sentences on either side, but I did a comma but. So let's say two sentences, but I want to combine these two. I'm going to use comma but. He was tired, but he finished his homework. You could grammatically use and. He was tired and he finished his homework. But if you really kind of think about author's purpose, or even when you're writing, I want to establish that he's tired, but even though he's tired, he finished his homework. So but is the appropriate term for that, right? He was tired, but he finished his homework. So really be cognizant of the words that you're using and the fanboys you're using. Even though comma fanboy is going to be correct, you need to make sure that you're picking the appropriate term for it. And then finally, semicolon. I love me a semicolon. It's the same thing. On either side, you need to have two complete thoughts, two complete sentences. And that semicolon is just indicating to the reader or whoever you're writing to that these two complete clauses or these two independent clauses correlate with one another, or they have some type of connection. So it was getting late. We decided to leave. So I could let's see, I could do a comma conjunction. It was getting late, comma, and we decided to leave. Or I can just put a semicolon there. It was getting late, we decided to leave. And it just correlates. You can put a period there, it's going to be fine, but it connects these two because we're almost seeming like a cause and effect, right? Because it's getting late, I decided to leave. Same thing for this bottom, or this next example. The team practiced hard. They were ready for the game. There is some correlation there because they practiced hard, they were ready for the game. Two complete sentences on either side. I'm going to use a semicolon. Doesn't mean that you can't edit these sentences any further to show correlation. You could say because the team practiced hard, they were ready for the game, but that kind of changes the whole structure of it. But we have options, right? So our first option, semicolon. If you have two complete independent clauses on either side, you can use a semicolon if they correlate. All right, so now that we've learned what makes up a sentence, how we can combine different sentences, let's talk about what it looks like when there's an error in those sentences. So if you misuse a comma, if you misuse a semicolon, or if you don't use anything at all. So the first thing that you'll see, the first error that you'll see that you'll either have to correct or identify is a comma splice. Now that's just a grammatical error that occurs when two independent clauses, so remember two complete sentences, are joined with just a comma instead of the comma coordinating conjunction, semicolon, or a period. If you have two complete sentences, the only way that you can separate those two, comma coordinating conjunction, a semicolon, or a period. If you just see a comma that's separating two independent sentences, then there's an error there. A run-on sentence is a grammatical error when two or more independent clauses, so two complete sentences, are joined with nothing. It's missing punctuation. If it's missing it, we call those a run-on sentences because you're running right through it into the next one, and we're missing that period or semicolon or coordinated conjunction. And then finally you have sentence fragments. So sentence fragments are when a group of words look like a sentence, but it's not a complete thought. And so think about those phrases that we were talking about. A lot of those sentence fragments, they're going to try and take phrases and pass them off as a full sentence. So it's important to understand all the components and how they're used to make a correct sense, so that way we can identify all of these 3 different types of errors when they come about. All right, so we're going to look practice some compound sentences, and all you're going to do is just tell me whether or not the example here is a correctly written compound sentence. So let's take a look at this first one. I want to go hiking, but it started to rain. Go ahead and take a look. Remember, look for that punctuation. Look on either side of it. Is it correctly written? Yes, we have 2 independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction. So we have I wanted to go hiking. It started to rain. 2 complete independent clauses, 2 complete sentences, and I'm joining them with a comma, coordinating conjunction, comma, but. Let's look at this next one. She likes to paint and she enjoys sculpting. So I kind of always a good way of looking at it, find where it splits. So she likes to paint, subject, verb, subject, verb. Take a look at what's here. Is that correct? No. Now, it needs a comma before the end, so it's kind of on the right track. We have that coordinating conjunction, but you need that comma. It cannot stand alone without it. So she likes to paint and she enjoys. We have our subject verb. What does she like to do? She likes to paint. She enjoys. What does she enjoy? She enjoys sculpting. These are 2 complete thoughts. So right here, I need to make sure I have the appropriate punctuation. Let's look at the next one. He studies hard, comma, he gets good grades. And so it's being separated here. Kind of look for the punctuation. Engage it. So he studies hard, that's a complete sentence. He gets good grades, that is a complete sentence. But can it be held together by just a comma? Remember, we just learned about that. No, it can't. This is a comma splice. And so this is a great example, a way to see this comma is splicing these 2 complete sentences in half. It's not used appropriately. We need a comma coordinating conjunction, we need a semicolon, or we need a period. This next one, he was tired, semicolon, he stayed up anyway. We see on either side of this semicolon 2 complete sentences. This is correct. Or 2 independent clauses, 2 complete sentences. And then finally we have I went to the store and I bought milk. I have a semicolon and that's combining these 2 independent clauses, and that's incorrect. That semicolon is strong enough to combine those 2 on its own. It does not need the and. Or if I wanted to use the and, that semicolon should be a comma.
All right, we're going to look at complex sentences next. A complex sentence is a sentence that contains these 2 components. An independent clause, which is the complete sentence, and remember that is a subject verb and it is a complete thought, and at least 1 dependent clause. And this is a clause that cannot stand alone. It can't be by itself. It can't serve as a complete sentence. And so there's 2 ways to write complex sentences. Now you can write it with your independent clause first and then your dependent clause. And for that, you're not going to see any type of punctuation, but you are going to see a subordinating conjunction that connects them. So that's a subordinating conjunction, and it's used to connect that dependent clause. So for instance, our example here is she stayed home since she wasn't feeling well. The next one is I went to bed early because I was tired. Another way that you can write a complex sentence, and one that you see quite commonly, or at least it's my favorite sentence, is the dependent clause first and then the independent clause. And in this type, you aren't going to see a subordinating, well, you are going to see it, but it's not connecting these 2 necessarily. You're going to see a comma. And so it's fun when you want to revise a sentence, change up the syntax, you can flip your complex sentences. So for instance, this is pretty much the same sentence, this first example. Since she wasn't feeling well, comma, she stayed home. Because I was tired, comma, I went to bed early. So that comma kind of helps support that dependent clause connect to that independent clause. So think of it as a formula. So if the independent clause comes first, then you don't need a comma, but you do need to make sure that that subordinating conjunction is there to complete the sentence. If the dependent clause comes first, if it's on the left side of the punctuation, then you need to make sure that one, it's a dependent clause, comma, and then on the right-hand side, you have an independent clause, a full sentence. So these are the formulas. If you understand them really well, it's a really great way to kind of change up your own writing, but then also identify some of those errors that you're going to see on the STAAR test.
All right, let's run through some complex sentence practice. Remember up here, we just have our 2 kind of formulas for creating a complex sentence: an independent clause, a subordinating conjunction that's used to start a dependent clause, and a dependent clause. So I don't necessarily need punctuation if I'm combining it using this. dependent clause, comma, independent clause. And so I'm going to use that comma as a guide sometimes in my sentences to make sure that they are correct. And let's take a look at this first example. It's a great way to see that particular case. So because he was late, he missed the meeting. So rule of thumb, all right, I see a comma there, so I know if it's a comma, I need to have a dependent clause on the left and an independent clause on the right. So let's look at my left. Because he was late. Yes, this is a dependent clause. It is not a complete sentence. It cannot stand by itself. On the right-hand side, so we're going to look and see if it's an independent clause. He missed the meeting. That sure is. We have he, that's my subject. My verb is missed, and then I have a direct object here. What did he miss? He missed the meeting. So yes, this is a correctly written complex sentence. And so the dependent clause is first. Our comma is used correctly. Let's look at this next one. When we went to the park after we finished our homework. So we went to the park, so I don't see any comma here, so maybe it's something like using a subordinating conjunction. We'll take a look. We went to the park, so we, the subject, or went is our verb, to the park is my prepositional phrase, after we finished our homework. And so after, when, it's just indicating this, it's connecting these two. After we finished our homework is a dependent clause. It cannot stand alone. So it's an independent clause followed by a dependent clause. There's no comma needed. And then finally, although she tried her best, period, she didn't pass the test. And so I don't see a comma or a subordinating conjunction, but I'm going to use this period as a guide, right? So on my left-hand side, if I'm using a period to end this little portion right here, then it needs to be a complete sentence. Is this a complete sentence? It looks like it, however, that although changes things, right? So although is a subordinating conjunction. We're stuck. It is a dependent clause. I need something. It cannot stand by itself. This right-hand side, it is a complete sentence. We have she didn't pass the test. I have a subject and a verb and a direct object. So because I have a dependent clause, because I have an independent clause, how would I fix it? I would just change that period to a comma. So it is incorrect. You would need to make an adjustment, a revision. All right, another way to connect two parts of a sentence is a colon. So it's a punctuation mark used to introduce, explain, or emphasize something in a sentence. It often comes after a complete sentence. So just know a colon is going to be have a complete sentence that starts it off. So you're going to use a colon to introduce a list, a noun or a noun phrase, a quotation or example. You can join two independent clauses where the second clarifies, summarizes, or explains the first. However, I am going to let you know majority of the time you're going to see a colon used to introduce something. So just keep that in mind. Remember, use a colon only after a complete sentence and never use a colon between a verb or preposition and its objects. You want to make sure it's a full complete sentence. So this is just an example. Think about the formula. You want a complete sentence, aka an independent clause, colon, and then a list, noun, noun phrase, quotation, or example. Or like I said, you can have another independent clause after. You just don't see that very often. So just some examples. I need the following items for class, colon, so this is a complete sentence, and it's just giving me a list of those things that I need. There was one thing she feared most, colon, failure. And so once again, it's just offering some clarity. What is it? We can have something that's incomplete like that on the other side. He made one thing clear, and then we have our colon, no one was allowed to be late. So once again, we are, emphasizing what he made clear, and then we have that complete sentence on here. So just some different options for a colon. Sometimes I've seen many students not use it correctly, and it's just because they are not putting a complete sentence on that first portion of it there. So just keep that in mind. It's a great way to introduce, explain, or emphasize. So just some practice. Remember, independent clause, colon, and then these different options, a list, a noun phrase, quotation, or example, or like I said, another independent clause. I bought 3 things, a map, a flashlight, and water. I have my colon here, so what I need to know is, I have my colon here, this left-hand side, so looking at my formula, I need to see an independent clause. That is an independent clause. It is a complete sentence. I is my subject. Brought is my verb. What did I bring? 3 things. That's my direct object. So complete sentence. And then on the other hand, on the other side of my colon, I have a list. So a complete sentence followed by a list. Same thing with this next one. My favorite subjects are colon, math, science, and history. So let me know if this is correct. It looks very similar to that first one, so take a look. So close. Now, a colon shouldn't come directly after a verb. So this is what changes everything right here. This is what makes it different than that first option here. So my favorite subjects are math, science, and history. So you would just take that colon out to make it a correct sentence. And then finally, she had one goal, to win the race. So is it an independent clause on the other side of that colon? It is. She had one goal, so that is a complete thought, a complete sentence. What was the goal? So we are clarifying, to win the race. And so that's my phrase, right? It's a prepositional phrase. So introduces or explains or emphasizes. All right, we're going to move on to STAAR practice. What we're going to do now is just use your knowledge on constructing sentences and the different errors that you can encounter to answer some actual STAAR questions. You can have a sheet of paper out, you can follow along, but you're going to see some examples of how these different components present themselves on the STAAR test. All right, here's question number 1. In the past, some were sold to be preserved or reused. However, most subway cars were scrapped for their metal. And so what change is needed in sentence 5? And so we've been talking about combining sentences, so it's very likely something in relation to that. However, take a look at those different answer choices. Pause the video if you need to, but make your selection, and then we're going to see if you're correct. All right, hopefully that you're coming back from pausing it and you've decided on your answer. Hopefully you pick B, change the comma after reused to a semicolon. Sorry, after reused to a semicolon. And so that is because now it's very tempting because we have however here to see that comma, however, comma. But whenever you see these types of words, you want a semicolon, however, comma, and then move on to the next sentence. Just a quick look at why some of these other ones were incorrect. I'm not about to change my verb tense. We'll talk more about verb tense in another video, but make sure that if you were to choose A, that you're doing it correctly. Look at all those other verbs. However, and instead, that's just your selection of the word choice. Making sure you're choosing an appropriate word choice. And then we have D, our answer choice, scrapped versus scraped. That is a spelling consideration, and so always double check your dictionary. You can cross out these answer choices or select the correct answer choice by just using your dictionary and seeing if that's something that needs to be changed. But yeah, so we have our comma, and that is the correct answer for that. All right, we're at question 2. Go ahead and when I tell you to, hit pause, and I want you to answer the question on your own. Question 2 states, parents, grandparents, and teachers often say the same thing to teenagers. Are you listening to me? What change should Jane make in sentence 1? So go ahead, hit pause, and then I want you to answer that question. All right, hopefully that you are back with us. What change should Jane make in sentence 1? You're going to insert a colon after teenagers. And so why would we insert a colon right after teenagers? Remember, what is our rule? For a colon, you should have a complete sentence on that beginning portion, that left-hand side, and then it should emphasize, clarify, or list something on the right-hand side. So parents, grandparents, and teachers often say the same thing to teenagers. That is a complete sentence. Colon, what are they saying? I'm going to clarify that. I'm going to offer that extra piece of information. Colon, are you listening to me? Now, if you want to double check your answers, you can. I would always go through the answer choices and make sure I can justify why they are incorrect. There's nothing indicating why I need to change or why I would need to change the verb tense in this. Say is perfectly fine. I don't need to change it. However, I can tell it's trying to distract you or trick you because we see listening right here. So are you listening to me? Now, when you're trying to match verb tense, you look at all the verbs and you're trying to match them. So I see listening here. I should probably change it to saying no, because this is a quote. It's not a part of the overall sentence. Don't use as an indicator for your verb tense. The next, are to our, those are two completely different words. I am not changing it. It would change the entire sentence. And then finally, change the question mark to a period. Not about to do that because the quote itself is asking the question, and that's why I need the question mark here. So that is the answer to that question. All right, question number 3, don't know why it's showing up. Challenged by Morg Livingston of the NA Ranch, Trav roped and tied a calf in only 22 seconds. And so we have within that paragraph, it was sentence 4 and sentence 5. What is the correct way to write sentence 4 and 5? So it's asking me a correct way. It's not telling me that it needs to stay. So there's something wrong with these two sentences, or at least there's something that I need to fix in there. So challenged by Morg Livingston of the NA Ranch, Trav roped and tied a calf in only 22 seconds. Go ahead and hit pause. I want you to read through your answer choices and make a selection. Then come back and you're going to see if you were right or wrong. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look. What is the correct way to write this sentence? It's B. Challenged by Morg Livingston of the NA Ranch, comma, Trav roped and tied a calf in only 22 seconds. So some of you caught that this beginning portion was a dependent clause, right? This here is a dependent clause. It's not a complete sentence. There's no subject here, right? Who challenged Morg Livingston? The NA Ranch did, but it's not correct, right? Your subject comes before your verb. So I could change it. I could say the NA Ranch challenged Morg Livingston challenged the NA Ranch. Excuse me, I got that a little bit backwards. But it's just a little backwards, and it's that sentence 4 right here. It's not a complete sentence, so I need to combine it. I can't combine it with a period. Looking at 5, Trav roped and tied a calf in only 22 seconds. That is a complete thought. So I should know if I have a dependent clause here where it says challenge, so 4, that's a dependent clause, and I have a independent clause in this next one. Let's think back. How can I combine those two things? I can use a comma. Or I can flip the sentence around, right? But we look at our options. So Trav, challenged by Morg Livingston of NA Ranch, comma, Trav roped and tied a calf in only 22 seconds. I have my dependent clause, comma, independent clause. That is a complex sentence. Let's prove the other sentences or other answer choices wrong. So Trav challenged by Morg Livingston of the NA Ranch, roped and tied a calf in only 22 seconds. We just have a comma. If we take a look on this latter end, roped and tied a calf in only 22 seconds. Trav challenged by Morg. In there, these are two incomplete sentences on either side. I would need something a little more than a comma to combine them together. And this is deceiving. It looks like a subject and a verb. So Trav challenged by Morg Livingston of the NA Ranch, but Trav hasn't done anything. Morg Livingston is the one that challenged him, right? So just keep that in mind. So those are two incomplete sentences on either side of that comma. The comma is not strong enough to hold those two together. It's just incomplete altogether. We have sentence fragments. Looking at C, challenged by Morg Livingston of the NA Ranch, semicolon, Trav roped and tied a calf in only 22 seconds. This C looks almost exactly like answer choice B, but the only difference is the semicolon and the comma. So that's when you need to know your answer choices, right? I know a semicolon needs to have two complete sentences on either side of it, and that's not the case here for answer choice C. And then finally, D, Trav roped and tied a calf in only 22 seconds, comma, he was challenged by Morg Livingston of the NA Ranch. These are two complete sentences on either side of this comma. This comma is not strong enough to connect two complete sentences on either side. So the only option I'm left with is B. All right, question 4. Today, visitors to Pecos see a giant welcome sign. A cowboy rides a bucking bronco beneath the claim, home of the world's first rodeo. What is the correct way to write sentence 5? So go ahead, hit pause, answer, or choose your answer, and then come right back and let's see if you're right. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look, see if you were correct. C is the correct way to write this sentence. Let's take a look. Because it doesn't give me the option to say, no change needed, there is some type of error in our original sentence. So today, visitors to Pecos see a giant welcome sign. A cowboy rides a, I see a run-on sentence. There needs to be something right here, right there. Sometimes it can be hard to catch. You just got to be ready for it. I'm trying to find a good color to use so you can see right here. Because I have a subject, so visitors, right? Visitors to Pecos. See, I have my verb, a giant welcome sign. So I have a complete sentence right here. So I already know there's going to be some form of punctuation. Let's look on the other side of this line. A cowboy rides a bucking bronco beneath the claim, home of the world's first rodeo. So that is a full complete sentence. So I'm going to need something, right? And I need to understand what this sentence is telling me. So today, visitors see a giant welcome sign of a cowboy riding see a giant welcome sign. And then the next portion is telling me what that sign is, right? So I'm getting some clarity. Looking at C, our correct answer. Today, when visitors arrive in Pecos, they see a giant welcome sign of the cowboy riding a bucking bronco beneath the claim, home of the world's first rodeo. Now, this might have thrown you for a loop because if you take a look, they really changed some things around. The more complex your sentences get, the more you would have an ability to kind of play around with the sentence structure and the way you kind of go about it. It gets really fun once you understand the rules because look at all the different possibilities you can play around with it, but also look at the different possibilities on how you can get a sentence wrong. This first one is correct. It's not changing the intent of what's being talked about. I'm still knowing my subject or our main focus is the visitors that are in Pecos. It still gives me emphasis on that welcome sign and what that sign entails. So it's fine that we changed around a couple things or maybe added some words to make sure this is grammatically correct. We just want to make sure that it keeps the original intent, is clear, and we have correct punctuation. Now let's just kind of justify why some of these are incorrect. Other options, A, B, and D. A is incorrect. You take a look. Today when visitors are welcome to Pecos, they see a giant sign. On the sign is a cowboy riding a bronco, which is bucking underneath the claim, home of the world's first rodeo. This one here, this is deceiving. This is an incomplete sentence. So today when visitors are welcome to Pecos, they see a giant sign. So it's still, it's not too bad. It's not completely out of the norm. On the sign is a cowboy riding a bronco, which is bucking underneath the claim, home of the world's first bronco. Once again, still correct, but it's choppy, right? We don't want choppy, we want clarity here. This is not the best option to choose, so just be mindful of that. Next, today, visitors to Pecos see a giant welcome sign of a cowboy riding a bucking bronco. They also notice, right here, that is a comma splice. This is a complete sentence. Today, all the way to bronco. My hand slipped. And then they also notice the claim, which is written about the bronco, home of the world's first rodeo. Two complete sentences on either side of that comma. I need something a little stronger than a comma to connect them. And then finally, today, when visitors arrive in Pecos, already I know this is not going to be the correct answer because this is an incomplete sentence. It is a fragment, and that's incorrect. So C is what we're left with. All right, you're on question 5, and that's our last question for this set. I wanted to go to the concert with my friends. I didn't have enough money to buy a ticket. And so go ahead, take a moment, hit pause, select your answer choice, and then come right back to see if you're correct. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look. D is our correct answer. I wanted to go to the concert, but I didn't have enough money. And so if we look at this original sentence, I noticed, and I hope you noticed too, that it was a run-on sentence. Right here, I wanted to go to the concert with my friends is a complete independent clause. It's a complete sentence. I didn't have enough money to buy a ticket. That is a complete sentence, but there's nothing separating the two. They just run right into each other. So I know there needs to be something to separate them. And knowing my rules, it's either going to be a comma conjunction, so comma fanboy, or it's going to be a semicolon. So right off the bat, I can probably already nix, and hopefully you did too. I could have taken out B, because B is only using a comma. It was really big, is only using a comma, and that's not strong enough. Remember, a comma is not strong enough to hold those two sentences together. If you look at A, I wanted to go to the concert with my friends, but I didn't have enough money. Now, this semicolon can be a little deceiving because we know a semicolon can connect two complete sentences, but this but here changes things. I cannot have a semicolon fanboy. It needs to be comma fanboy. So that made A incorrect. And then looking at C, wanting to go to the concert with my friends, and I didn't have enough money. Wanting, I'm starting this with a verb. Oops, I didn't mean to do that in red. But this is an incomplete sentence, right? Wanting to go to the concert with friends, comma, I didn't have enough money. That might be a little more correct, at least grammatically. But I have a comma conjunction here, right? And when I have a comma conjunction, I need to have two complete sentences on either side. I didn't have enough money is complete, but wanting to go to the concert, that is a dependent clause, and it needs just a comma for that. So D is my correct answer. All right, thanks for sticking around. Take a look at those different sample questions. Hopefully you'll have some more practice items to work through, or even as you're reviewing your own work, make sure that you are looking for these different types of errors in sentence constructions to make your writing better.